we have to start with Saturday because, okay, a lot of people, we have to start with the end. So we're going straight to the end because it's the main talking about. The fast, whatever you want to call it. Personally, I don't think it's a fast, right? It's just something that can happen in a motor race. And the fallout first, before we delve into it, Ed, the fallout from me on Twitter was a bit of a shame. Because, okay, yes, we don't want to see cars run out of energy. We don't want to see, this sort of mix-up or really bad ending to what was shaping up to a great race. But it's motorsport. But it's the rules. To a casual fan, right, maybe it doesn't look great, right? And maybe it paints electric vehicles in a bad light, per se. But for me, it's still a sport. And things can go well. Things can be brilliant, right? And people were making reference to Pascal Wehrlein in Mexico. And we had that amazing finish where Lucas Di Grassi just passes him across the line. And that was due to energy reduction and Pascal Wehrlein having to be a bit more careful with his energy. But obviously, Saturday was a bit different. So I just want to get your initial views. Like, did you see that? People calling it Formula E's darkest days. And I'm like, I don't think it was that bad.
Yeah, especially when you consider earlier in the season we were talking about a missile strike during the podium ceremony in the second round in Saudi Arabia, or even last year when we had the track worker Helder Moreira sadly lose his life in Berlin. Both of those very dark days compared to this, which was, embarrassing, but darkest day in Formula E history? I don't think so. And, there are a couple, I won't name names, but there were a couple of people who were being a bit melodramatic about it. And it's sad to see Formula E with, the detractors who are basically waiting for Formula E to slip up and they never comment when it's going well, they only comment when it's going badly. And then you have the people who are really into Formula E also criticizing it as well, maybe because it looks bad and because other people are going to complain about it. So it's an odd situation, but it was really really caused by that final the reduction, just that final safety car, and a sort of a perfect storm, a confluence, if you will, of unfortunate events as basically Da Costa crossed the finish line about 15 seconds before the clock ran out, which meant instead of having to do one more lap, they had to do 2 more laps. And a lot of drivers weren't quite able to pull that off. Some were, though, and benefited enormously.
Yeah, like, we here at Formula Reason, and I'm sure other people have as well, have been looking into that. But actually, after further investigation, after further calculations and maths, no one was actually at fault. The FIA, people were pointing fingers heavily at the FIA, and the FIA obviously pointing fingers back at drivers and saying, well, actually, Antonio Felix da Costa, for example, could have helped us, could have, made the race a lap shorter so everyone would have finished and we wouldn't have had this ending. And there was a lot of blame games, and people were looking to put someone at fault. But with the investigations that we've done, really and truly, no one was at fault, because the FIA have made the correct deductions. People thought they hadn't made the correct deductions. Even we at some point thought that they didn't, but then, as I said, once we investigated a bit more, we found out that actually they did. So let's just explain how this sort of came about. So basically, what had happened is the FIA reduced energy, right? 1 kilowatt per minute under a safety car period. And then however long that safety car period is, for example, so 5 minutes per se, it would be 5 kilowatts that would be reduced. If it was, for example, 5 minutes and 45 seconds, even if it's 5 minutes and 59 seconds, 6 kilowatts is not, it doesn't matter for what is in the second bracket, whatever minute it's in. So if the safety car period ends at 5 minutes 59 seconds, .999, it's still 5 kilowatts that would be reduced. It wouldn't be 6, if that makes sense, right? So obviously they've reduced 5, but because they reduced that 5 kilowatts, so let's say they reduced 5 kilowatts for one safety car period, the battery power itself is 54 kilowatts. So that's how much power, usable energy that they can have at the start of the race. But when they reduce 5 kilowatts, the next time that they do that, it says, let's say they have another safety car period and it's another 5 kilowatts per se. So that deduction is not from 54 kilowatts per hour. It's done from 49 kilowatts per hour until the next one and the next one and the next one. And we had 5, Ed. We had 5 safety car periods. So by the time, right, by the time the final energy reduction was done, the FIA were doing that calculation from 38 kilowatts. Now, what we've learned, and I think what the series has learnt in general from this, is that the longer the safety, not really the more safety cars, because if we have like short safety car periods, for example, 2-3 minutes, then it's not going to be a massive extra deduction per se. But the longer the safety car period, let's say we have one safety car period that's 15 minutes long, but I'm sure if it was going to be that long, they would probably have red flagged it. But let's say if it's a really long 7 minute, then you're taking that 8, and then let's say we have another one, then you've got 16 kilowatts. So the maths becomes, effectively though, Ed, the longer the safety car period, the bigger the chance of a bigger energy reduction later down the line for your second one, because your second one would then be 8 kilowatts from 49 kilowatts, for example. So then it's a bigger energy reduction. I hope all of that makes sense. I think I lost my way a little bit, but I think I've explained the main point of why that's happened and why actually the last energy, yes, it was 5 kilowatts. Yes, we've had but it was actually such a big percentage difference of 13% that was actually taken from the cars, rather than if we did it from 54, it would have been only 9.
Yeah, and so you had Da Costa, who went from something like 13 or 12% down to 6. I think it was down to 6% that you had to do the last 2 laps.
He had 19%.
De Vries had 8%. Yeah.
Yeah, so Da Costa had 19%, so he'd taken away 13% of energy.
And De Vries had, I think, like 22% or something before the safety car came out. And so I think the maths are right there. I was just about to, because I've been doing them over my head for like several times for most of this week just to make sure, like, is that right? Is that right? Surely it can't be right, but it is right. You're right. There are a lot of people who I think were also being critical of the rule in general, which is a bit odd because they weren't saying anything when it was giving us all those dramatic finishes. It's they're only complaining when it suddenly becomes a problem. A lot of people have been critical of the timed races as well. I think if you did it as laps though, then you have the potential issue of the cars having to do 30 laps, but with the energy they've got, because they still use a little bit of energy under the safety car, even with braking and regenning, and it's even more difficult to do that at Valencia, where it's mainly straights and fast corners, with only a couple of little chicanes added in, so they can actually get some regenning and braking in. Without that, it's on a normal street circuit, it'd be a much more easier thing. But yeah, so I do think the circuit played into it. The fact that it was raining also didn't help. Because the lap times were so much slower anyway, but mostly they would cause more incidents, the rain. So yeah, it was a unique set of circumstances. Like I said, a confluence of things going wrong. If just one little thing had happened a little bit differently, then probably we would have seen maybe either just one more lap instead of 2, or potentially things going a bit different. I think what also didn't help was it being a normal traditional purpose-built circuit. When Lotterer caused the safety car and got stuck in the gravel, there wasn't like on a street circuit you'd have a crane to lift her out. They had to actually venture out into the gravel to retrieve the Porsche. So I think that was why they needed that safety car right at the end. So yeah, I think I answered your question there. I've sort of, because it's such a complicated issue, almost my brain is fried trying to think about maths and also the reason for the maths.
Yeah, like I think really and truly, everyone's learned from this situation. I think the teams have learned from this situation. I think even in 45 minutes, even in street courses, but because of the rain, we had so much more incidents. And as you said, like things that we'd never seen before, cars getting stuck in a gravel trap, for example, which needs to go out, and that takes longer than them actually crashing into the wall, and there's a crane there to just quickly, or there's mechanics there to just push them into the runoff area, that's like 20 yards away per se. Racing on actual circuits in a sense there, and I think we'll get onto this topic a little bit later, Ed, in terms of what we've actually thought of for FE actually racing at an actual circuit compared to the street circuits that I say know and love, but I know a lot of people have their opinions on that, but I think for us that we know and love, because I think it'd be quite interesting, because obviously that wouldn't have happened in a street circuit. We would have had more racing time, but because we have these gravel traps and we have these things in a natural circuit, potentially there's less time. If there is a mistake and there is a safety car, it potentially deducts more racing time. But we'll put that to the side for 1 second. Do you think the teams just were caught out? 5 safety cars is a huge amount of safety cars in Formula E, and it was just one of those learning things that we need to take into account. But I also think if we were to have 5 safety cars again in another race, something like this could happen again. So, where do we go from here? Like, do we say, look, the rule's the rule, this was it, it's worked brilliantly, we've had one bad race, doesn't mean we're going to have another bad race. It's unlikely. But because there is that probability chance of it happening again, do we try and find something to say, okay, how can we make sure that we don't run out of energy on the final lap? Or if we're going green for the final lap of racing, or for 2 additional laps that we don't actually run out of energy.
Well, that's interesting. There's got to be a balance, right? Because what we want to see as fans is it to be a challenge for the teams. They've got these really efficient, powertrains and obviously the regenerative braking, which is really impressive in these Formula E cars. So we want to see that tested to its maximum. We want to see if we don't want to see safety cars basically letting off the field, which was, I think in season 5 that was the rules. We didn't have the energy reduction until I think either midway through season 5 or at the beginning of season 6. I'm pretty sure the rule was ratified.
I think it was brought in for like season 5. To be honest with you,
I think so. Yeah, because Mexico was in the middle of season 5, and that they had the red flag. I think, and either that was the first time they did those rules. They basically restarted the race without everyone having full energy, and just with 40 minutes plus 1 lap left to go, or that was the first time we saw it. I can't remember which. I'm pretty sure that may be just the blueprint, and from then on, that race being so successful, so dramatic, where only Nissan and maybe Pascal Wehrlein just running out at the very end just before the line and having to coast to make sure he didn't get disqualified, and Lucas Grassi breezing past as a result, and that being a really dramatic moment, and that being really successful. That was what really caused that. Well, energy reduction is not such a bad idea, and that was what sort of put the momentum for this rule to be put in place in the first place. So yeah, I definitely think having that challenge is great. We've had that's one moment, but there's several others where we've had close finishes where people have been on the bubble and they've either made it or they've just run out, and it's been really heartbreaking and dramatic. But that's Formula E, and I think what we don't want too much is repeats of what we saw on Saturday in Valencia, where we have 17 cars are running just before the restart and only 9 finished the race, and even the ones that did finish, like Jean Verne, for example, who finished last of the 9 finishers classified, had to coast to a lap 6 minutes, almost 6 minutes in length. He was like 4 minutes 20 behind De Vries, who won. And there was an element of luck in it as well. I think for teams like Dragon, like Muller had a drive-through early in the race during a full course yellow, so he was basically saving energy from that point onwards. Mercedes were being very cautious as well, and full credit to them because it worked out. But you do get the sense of when everyone had this energy suddenly taken away from them right at the end, there was no real time to really react. I think the teams that were in constant communication with their drivers really benefited, whereas the ones who were maybe they will update you at certain periods in the race sort of strategy, that sort of backfired, and we saw Roland and Sims just carrying on and almost like sort of realising they were going to be disqualified, but there was no time to really react at that point. Like I mentioned, Norman Nato earlier just did 2 corners after the restart before having to stop, which was a bit unfortunate for him, but I think he admitted he mismanaged it anyway. So yeah, there's a balance to be struck. I think Valencia went over it, but so could easily on set it could easily have gone the other way, and we maybe wouldn't even be having this conversation. So I think you and maybe like the FIA have rightly said, they've stood by the rules, saying, look, 1 out of 17 odd races, 20 odd races that went wrong isn't a bad strike rate, because we've had 19 others that have been great, or 19 odd, might be actually 16 odd if I get the maths right. Maths, it's a big thing, isn't it? I'm going to have to throw my GCSE in maths away. It's the highest degree in maths that I have. So.